The marble floor of the Sterling Vance lobby felt colder than usual as the security alarm shrieked, freezing every employee in their tracks. Mason Calder stood at the center of the noise, his canvas messenger bag clutched to his chest, looking more like a frightened child than a corporate threat. High above on the glass mezzanine, Damien Sorel leaned against the railing, sipping espresso with the casual indifference of a man watching a bug drown. He had orchestrated this moment down to the second, needing a scapegoat for the missing funds before the auditors arrived on Monday morning. But Damien didn't notice the way Tessa Langford from HR stepped forward, her hands trembling not with fear, but with a sudden, fierce resolve to intervene. He also didn't know that the mailroom boy he was about to destroy held the only key to the company's survival in his pocket. Watch closely, because the man with the least power is about to change everything. The security guard's hand was heavy on Mason's shoulder, a grip meant to intimidate. Mason did not flinch, though his heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The lobby was filled with whispers that sounded like the hissing of angry snakes. Damien descended the grand staircase slowly, savoring the theatricality of the moment. He adjusted his silk tie, his eyes locking onto Mason with predatory delight. "I think we need to see what is in the bag, Mr. Calder," Damien announced loudly. The silence that followed was suffocating, thick with judgment and premature verdicts. Tessa pushed through the crowd, her heels clicking sharply against the polished stone floor. She saw the panic in Mason's eyes and felt a surge of protective anger rise. "This is against protocol, Mr. Sorel," she stated, her voice shaking but audible. Damien laughed, a dry sound that lacked any warmth or genuine humor. "Protocol is for employees who don't steal from the firm, Ms. Langford," he sneered. He snatched the bag from Mason, dumping its contents onto the security desk. A sleek, silver hard drive clattered out, looking alien among the mundane personal items. Mason stared at the drive, his face a mask of genuine confusion and shock. He had never seen that device before in his life, yet there it sat. "Corporate espionage," Damien declared, holding the drive up like a hunting trophy. "This contains the unreleased schematics for the Project Ion prototype," he lied smoothly. The crowd gasped, the murmurs turning into open accusations and hostile glares. Mason looked at Tessa, his eyes begging her to believe in his innocence. She held his gaze, a silent promise that she was not looking away. "I didn't take that," Mason said, his voice quiet but surprisingly steady in the noise. "I have worked here for 3 years, and I have never taken a paperclip." Damien stepped closer, invading Mason's personal space with aggressive, toxic dominance. "Thieves always have a perfect record until they get caught, don't they, Mason?" He turned to the security guards, snapping his fingers with dismissive arrogance. "Escort him to HR immediately to process his termination and hand him over to police." Mason was shoved forward, stumbling slightly as the humiliation burned his cheeks. Tessa moved to intercept them, blocking the path to the elevators with her body. "I will escort him, Mr. Sorel," she insisted, her chin raised in defiance. "It is an HR matter now, and I will handle the paperwork personally." Damien's eyes narrowed, sensing a challenge to his absolute authority in the room. "Fine," he spat, "but if he disappears, it's your career on the line too." She nodded once, turning to Mason and guiding him toward the service elevator. Have you ever stood by someone when the whole world turned against them? Inside the elevator, the noise of the lobby faded into a heavy, mechanical hum. Mason leaned against the metal wall, exhaling a breath he had held for minutes. "Thank you," he whispered, looking at the floor to hide his watering eyes. Tessa did not look at him, staring straight ahead at the illuminated floor numbers. "Don't thank me yet, Mason," she said softly, her knuckles white on her folder. "Damien doesn't just want you fired, he wants you destroyed to cover his tracks." The doors opened, and they stepped into the hallway, walking toward the inevitable. They walked past the glass-walled conference rooms where executives laughed over expensive lunches. No one looked up. The mailroom temp was invisible to them, even in crisis. Mason touched his pocket, checking for the small, ancient iron key he always carried. It was still there, cold and reassuring against his leg, a secret weight. He knew Damien had planted the drive, but proving it would require impossible access. Tessa opened her office door, ushering him inside away from the prying eyes. The real battle was just beginning, and neither of them was safe now. The office was small, smelling faintly of vanilla and accumulated paper dust. Tessa sat behind her desk, pulling out the standard termination forms with trembling hands. She uncapped a pen, but she couldn't bring herself to write his name. "I know you didn't do it," she said, finally looking up at him. Mason sat in a guest chair, his posture rigid, like a soldier awaiting court-martial. "How can you be sure? The evidence was right there in my bag." She sighed, pushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear, looking tired. "Because Damien has been asking about mailroom protocols for weeks," she revealed quietly. "He wanted to know who had access to the server room delivery specifically." Mason's eyes widened. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to click together. He needed a patsy, Mason realized, someone invisible enough to not be missed. Tessa nodded, tapping the pen against the desk in a nervous, rhythmic beat. "He's moving money, Mason. Everyone in HR hears the rumors about the accounts. If you knew your boss was corrupt, would you stay silent to survive?" Mason looked at the form that would end his time at Sterling Vance immediately. "If I sign that, I'm admitting guilt," he said, pushing the paper away. "I can't sign it, Tessa. My grandfather. He wouldn't want me to fold." She looked at him curiously, sensing there was more to his story than poverty. "Your grandfather? I thought you said you were alone in the city." "I am," Mason corrected quickly, realizing he had almost said too much. "I just mean, I was raised to stand up for the truth." "I can delay filing this for 24 hours, Tessa offered, lowering her voice. "I can claim the system is down or that I need legal clarification." Mason looked at her, stunned by the risk she was taking for him. "Damien will fire you if he finds out you're stalling," he warned her. "I don't care," she said, though her eyes betrayed her fear of unemployment. "I can't let him ruin a good man just to buy himself a yacht. This is what integrity looks like when it actually costs you something." Mason stood up, pacing the small room, his mind racing with possibilities. "I need to get into the archives," he said, turning to face her. "Not the digital ones. The physical archives in the sub-basement, the old records." Tessa frowned, confused. "Why? Everything is digitized. No one goes down there." "Not everything," Mason said, a strange intensity entering his normally passive voice. "There are founding documents that were never scanned. I need to find them." He looked at her, silently asking for one more massive favor. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a keycard with a red stripe. "This is my master access," she whispered, sliding it across the desk. "If you get caught with this, I can't save you. You'll go to jail." Mason took the card, his fingers brushing hers, a spark of connection jumping. "I promise you, Tessa, I will make this right. For both of us." He pocketed the card, feeling the weight of her trust settle on his shoulders. Sometimes the only way out is to go deeper into the danger. He turned to the door, checking the hallway through the frosted glass pane. "It'll be invisible," he promised, "just like I've always been in this building." Tessa watched him go, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. She looked at the blank termination form and shredded it slowly, piece by piece. It was a small act of rebellion, but it felt like starting a war. Outside, the corporate machine ground on, indifferent to the lives it crushed. Mason slipped into the shadows, heading down toward the secrets buried in the dark. The elevator to the sub-basement was slow, rattling like an old cage. Mason watched the numbers descend, leaving the polished world of the executives behind. Sterling Vance was a skyscraper built on a foundation of fear and silence. Employees walked with their heads down, terrified of drawing Damien's critical eye. Productivity was high, but innovation was dead, strangled by the culture of compliance. Mason knew this better than anyone. He delivered mail to every terrified department. He had seen the crying in the break rooms and the panic attacks in restrooms. The doors opened onto a concrete corridor lit by flickering, buzzing fluorescent tubes. The air down here was stale, smelling of damp paper and forgotten history. This was the graveyard of the company, where old files came to rot. Mason moved quickly, his sneakers silent on the dusty, gray concrete floor. He wasn't just a temp, he was the grandson of the founder, Elias Vance. No one knew. Elias had wanted Mason to learn the business from below. Watch them, Elias had said on his deathbed. See who they truly are. Mason found a heavy steel door marked Archive Sector 4 Restricted Access. He swiped Tessa's card, holding his breath as the light turned green. The lock disengaged with a heavy clank that echoed in the empty hall. Inside, rows of metal shelves stretched into the darkness, stacked with boxes. This was where the truth lived, hidden under layers of bureaucracy and dust. He wasn't looking for financial records, he was looking for the voting trust. Do you know the history of the place you work, or just the rumors? He began searching the section marked 1985, the year the company went public. His grandfather had created a failsafe to prevent a hostile takeover by greed. A dormant block of voting shares, activated only in times of moral crisis. Mason was the trustee, but he needed the physical certificate to prove it. He pulled boxes down, coughing as dust clouds bloomed in the stale air. Damien thought he was firing a temp, he was actually waking a sleeping giant. The irony would have been funny if the stakes weren't so terrifyingly high. As he searched, he remembered the way Damien treated the cleaning staff. He remembered the layoffs last Christmas, executed via email while Damien partied. This wasn't just about clearing his name anymore, it was about saving the legacy. He found a leather-bound ledger, the binding cracked and faded with age. Inside, the handwriting was familiar, his grandfather's distinct, looping, careful script. To the future, it read. May it be guided by wisdom, not avarice. Mason traced the words, feeling a surge of connection to the old man. Suddenly, the sound of the elevator moving startled him into freezing completely. Someone else was coming down to the sub-basement at this hour. Mason scrambled behind a row of shelves, clutching the ledger to his chest. He peeked through a gap in the boxes, his heart pounding in his ears. The elevator doors opened, and heavy, polished dress shoes stepped onto the concrete. It was Damien's personal assistant, a man named Greg who specialized in silence. Greg was carrying a shredder. Mason realized with horror that they were scrubbing the physical archives too. Damien wasn't just framing Mason, he was erasing the past to control the future. Greg plugged in the shredder, the noise harsh in the quiet room. He began pulling files from the shelf opposite Mason, feeding them into the machine. Mason had to move, but any sound would give away his position instantly. He was trapped in the dark with the evidence, and the enemy was armed. What would you do if the truth was being destroyed right in front of you? Mason crouched in the shadows, his legs cramping from the awkward, tight position. Greg hummed a mindless tune while he destroyed decades of corporate history. The shredder ate paper with a relentless, grinding hunger that set teeth on edge. Mason needed a distraction, something to get Greg out of the room. He spotted a fire alarm lever on the far wall, near the exit. It was 20 feet away, across an open space of illuminated concrete floor. Risking everything, he waited for Greg to turn his back to the shelf. He took a breath and rolled a roll of packing tape across the floor. It hit the metal leg of a shelving unit with a distinct, hollow thud. Greg stopped shredding immediately, whipping his head around toward the noise. "Hello? Is someone down here?" Greg called out, his voice trembling slightly. Mason used the moment to sprint silently in his socks toward the door. He slipped through just as Greg moved to investigate the source of the sound. He didn't pull the alarm, he just needed to escape with the ledger. Upstairs, Damien was holding court in his corner office, staring at the city. He felt invincible, the audit rigged and the scapegoat perfectly positioned. He picked up his phone, dialing the head of security with a smirk. "I want a full sweep of the building. Make sure Calder is gone. And check his locker again. I want to make sure we found everything. Damien hung up, checking his reflection in the window, adjusting his cufflinks. Arrogance is always the blind spot that leads to the hardest fall. Mason made it to the mailroom, his heart rate finally beginning to slow down. It was empty. The other workers had left for the day hours ago. He hid the ledger inside his own locker, behind a false back panel. This was his territory, the one place he knew better than anyone else. He pulled out his phone and texted Tessa, "I have it. Meet me." The door to the mailroom swung open, and Damien stood there, framed by light. It wasn't a coincidence Damien had come to gloat one last time. "Still here, rat?" Damien asked, stepping into the room with a sneer. "I thought I told security to throw you out on the street." Mason stood tall, no longer hunching his shoulders to appear smaller. "I was just collecting my personal things," Mason lied, his voice steady. Damien walked around him, circling like a shark inspecting a piece of meat. "You know, you almost look confident," Damien mused. "It doesn't suit you." He leaned in close, whispering into Mason's ear with venomous malice. "I'm going to make sure you never work in this city again. I'll blacklist you until you're begging for change on the subway corner." Mason looked Damien in the eye, seeing the hollowness behind the expensive suit. "You can try," Mason said, surprising Damien with his directness. "But eventually, the numbers have to balance, Damien. They always do." Damien laughed, backing away. "The numbers say whatever I tell them to say. Beware the man who believes he is the author of his own reality." Damien turned and left, the click of his shoes fading down the hall. Mason exhaled, his hands shaking as the adrenaline crash finally hit him. He retrieved the ledger from the locker and slipped it into his bag. He had to get this to Tessa. She was the only one who could verify it. He locked his locker with a second, heavy-duty padlock he brought from home. It was a signal to anyone watching: this space is not yours anymore. He walked out into the night, the weight of the company on his back. Mason met Tessa at a small, all-night diner 3 blocks from the office. The neon sign buzzed overhead, casting a flickering red light on the table. He slid the ledger across the formica surface, keeping his hand on it. "This proves everything," he whispered, "but we need to decode the trust clauses." Tessa opened the book, her eyes scanning the faded ink with intense focus. "This is incredible, Mason. This predates the current board's entire tenure." She looked up at him, seeing him for the first time as an equal. "But the evidence against you," Tessa started, playing devil's advocate. "The hard drive. The login logs. It's all so perfectly constructed." "That's the point," Mason said, taking a sip of terrible, lukewarm coffee. "It's too clean. Real negligence is messy. This is a scripted drama." He pulled out a piece of paper where he had noted the timestamps. "Look. The drive was accessed at 3:00 a.m. My badge swiped out at 6:00 p.m. They faked the badge logs, but they forgot to fake the camera footage." Tessa's eyes lit up. "The lobby cameras are on a separate, independent server. Security doesn't control them, the building management company does." "Exactly," Mason smiled, a rare expression that transformed his face. "We need to request that footage before Damien realizes his mistake." "I can do that," Tessa said, "as part of the internal HR investigation. It's standard procedure for a termination appeal. He can't stop it. When the enemy makes a mistake, you must be ready to strike." "But we have to be fast," Mason warned. "The board meeting is tomorrow. If Damien gets the vote of confidence, he dissolves the trust forever." "How do you know that?" Tessa asked, looking at the ledger again. Mason hesitated, then turned the book to the very last page. "Because my name is right here," he said, pointing to the bottom line. "Mason Vance Calder. I turn 25 tomorrow. The trust vests then." Tessa gasped, her hand covering her mouth in absolute shock. You're Elias Vance's grandson? She whispered, staring at him with wide eyes. Why are you working in the mailroom? You own half the building. I wanted to earn it, Mason said simply. And I wanted to know the people. I know who works late. I know who steals lunches. I know who cares. And I know Damien is a cancer that needs to be cut out. Tessa reached across the table and took his hand, squeezing it tight. Then let's go get your company back, Mr. Vance, she smiled. They spent the next hour drafting the request for the security footage. Tessa used her laptop, tethered to her phone to avoid the company network. Mason watched her work, admiring her intelligence and her bravery. She wasn't doing this for money, she was doing it because it was right. For a lonely heir hiding in a mailroom, that meant more than anything. Sent, she said, hitting enter with a flourish. Now we wait. Sometimes the quietest moments are the ones that forge the strongest bonds. They left the diner as the sun began to peek over the skyline. The city was waking up, unaware of the corporate war about to explode. You should get some sleep, Tessa said. You look exhausted. I can't sleep, Mason said. I have to prepare for the board meeting. You're not invited, she reminded him gently. I will be, he said, touching the ledger in his bag. I have the invite. He walked her to her car, a gentleman despite the exhaustion and stress. The next morning, the Sterling Vance building loomed like a fortress of glass. Mason arrived wearing his usual mailroom uniform, but with a suit underneath. He went straight to the locker room, avoiding the main lobby entirely. His locker had been pried open, the company lock was cut. But the second lock, the heavy-duty one, was still holding strong. They hadn't been able to get into the false back panel. He opened it, retrieving a clean, pressed suit he had stashed months ago. He changed in the cramped stall, shedding the identity of the temp. The suit fit perfectly, tailored Italian wool that screamed authority. He looked in the mirror, straightening his tie with steady hands. Mason Calder the temp was gone, Mason Vance was here to collect. He put the ledger in a sleek leather briefcase he had also hidden. He walked out of the locker room, his stride long and purposeful. Dress for the job you want? No, dress for the power you already have. On the executive floor, Tessa was already at her desk, looking pale. Damien was pacing the hallway, shouting into his phone about the audit. He stopped when he saw Tessa, narrowing his eyes suspiciously. Where is the termination paperwork? He demanded, looming over her desk. It's processing, she lied, keeping her voice level. System lag. Fix it, he snapped. I want him erased from the database by noon. He didn't notice the security camera footage playing on her minimized window. The footage showed clearly that no one had entered the mailroom at 3:00 a.m. But it did show Damien's assistant entering the server room with a drive. Tessa copied the file to a USB stick, hiding it in her palm. She looked up to see Mason stepping off the elevator. For a second, she didn't recognize him in the suit. He looked powerful, handsome, and terrifyingly calm. She stood up, her heart racing. The night had arrived. Mason walked past the reception desk, ignoring the startled receptionist. Sir, you can't go in there. She called out, reaching for the phone. The board is in session. I know, Mason said without stopping. In the agenda. He approached the double mahogany doors of the boardroom. He could hear Damien's voice inside, spinning lies about growth and stability. He paused for 1 second, hand on the brass handle. This was the moment he had trained for in the shadows for 3 years. He thought of the single mother in accounting denied a raise. He thought of the janitor Damien had fired for looking him in the eye. He pushed the doors open with a force that slammed them against the walls. Every head at the massive table turned in unison. Damien froze mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open in shock. Disrupting the status quo requires a grand entrance. Security! Damien shouted, pointing a shaking finger at Mason. Get this mailroom trash out of here. He's deranged. The board members murmured, confused by the transformation of the temp. Mason walked to the head of the table, placing the briefcase down. I wouldn't call security, Damien, Mason said, his voice filling the room. Unless you want them to arrest you for embezzlement and fraud. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy with shock. An older board member, Mr. Henderson, peered over his glasses. Young man, you are the mail clerk. This is highly irregular. I was the mail clerk, Mason corrected, opening the briefcase. I am also the sole beneficiary of the Vance Voting Trust. He slid the ledger down the long table it spun and stopped before Henderson. Check the signature, Mason commanded. It's your old partner's. Henderson opened the book, his face draining of color as he read. Damien's face turned a violent shade of red. This is a forgery. He's a liar and a thief. We have proof he stole the prototype designs. Tessa walked into the room then, holding the USB drive high. Actually, we have proof you framed him, she announced clearly. This is security footage of your assistant planting the evidence. She plugged the drive into the presentation laptop before anyone could stop her. The screen on the wall flickered to life, showing the grainy footage. There was Greg, clear as day, using Damien's pass to enter the server room. The board members watched in stunned silence, mouths agape. Damien looked around the room, realizing the walls were closing in. That doesn't prove I ordered it, he stammered, sweating. It proves you control the people who did, Mason said coldly. Truth is a light that cockroaches cannot survive in. Mr. Sorrell, Henderson said, his voice icy and dangerous. I think you should sit down. We have much to discuss. Mason took the seat at the head of the table, the CEO's chair. It felt natural, like he had finally come home after a long journey. The trust holds 51 of the voting shares, Mason stated. And as of today, I am voting for a complete leadership audit. Starting with the chief financial officer. Damien slumped into his chair, the fight draining out of him. He looked at Mason, really looked at him, and saw the resemblance. The eyes of Elias Vance stared back at him, judging his greed. Tessa stood by Mason's side, a silent sentinel of support. She had risked her career for a temp, and she had saved the company. Mason looked up at her, a small, private smile touching his lips. Loyalty is the only currency that actually matters in the end. The meeting that followed was a bloodbath of polite corporate language. Damien was stripped of his titles, his access, and his dignity. Security was called, but this time, they came for the man in the silk suit. Mason watched calmly as Damien was escorted out, shouting threats. You'll regret this. This company is nothing without me. This company was here before you, and it will be here after, Mason said. The door closed, sealing Damien's fate and ending his reign of terror. Mason turned to the board, who looked at him with a mix of fear and awe. We are going to make some changes, Mason announced. No more fear. No more invisible employees. We value everyone. And Ms. Langford is the new head of people and culture. Tessa's jaw dropped. Mason. I mean, Mr. Vance. You earned it, he said. You were the only one who did the right thing. And I need people who do the right thing running this place. The board voted unanimously to confirm his position as interim chairman. They didn't really have a choice, given the ledger, but they also saw the potential. Mason wasn't just an heir, he knew the company from the ground up. He knew the leaks in the basement and the leaks in the budget. He spent the rest of the day in meetings, unraveling Damien's mess. It was exhausting work, but for the first time, it felt meaningful. Leadership is not about being served, it is about serving others. That evening, Mason and Tessa stood on the roof, looking at the city lights. The wind whipped their clothes, carrying the sounds of the traffic below. So, Tessa said, leaning against the parapet. Mason Vance. I liked Mason Calder better, he admitted, loosening his tie. He had fewer meetings and more time to talk to the pretty HR girl. Tessa laughed, a bright, happy sound that seemed to clear the air. Well, the HR girl is now an executive, so she's very busy too. I couldn't have done it without you, Mason said, moving closer. You saved me, Tessa. In more ways than one. He looked at her, seeing the strength and kindness that defined her. I just did my job, she whispered, looking up at him. No, you did what was right. That's rare. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The tension that had been building for days finally broke. They didn't kiss, not yet. It was too soon, too much had happened. But they stood together, shoulder to shoulder, against the skyline. A team. A partnership. Something real in a world of fakes. What happens tomorrow? Tessa asked, looking at the horizon. Tomorrow we start rebuilding, Mason said. And I start learning how to be the boss without becoming Damien. I won't let you, she promised. And he knew she meant it. The next weeks were a whirlwind of activity at Sterling Vance. The culture shifted almost overnight, the fear evaporated. Mason moved his office to the middle floor, refusing the penthouse. He wanted to be accessible, to be seen, to be part of the team. He kept the mailroom stops on his daily walkthrough. Hey Mason, the new mail clerk would say, and Mason would high-five him. It was a small gesture, but it sent a powerful message to everyone. Tessa was thriving in her new role, rewriting the draconian policies. She implemented open feedback sessions and mental health days. The employees loved her. She was the heart of the new administration. She and Mason worked late often, ordering Thai food and reviewing files. The intimacy between them grew with every shared joke and crisis solved. They were building a company, but they were also building a life. Work is just work, unless you're building it with someone you love. One afternoon, a letter arrived for Mason, marked personal. It was from Damien, sent from a lawyer's office. It was a threat of a lawsuit for wrongful termination and defamation. Mason read it with a sigh, tossing it onto his desk. He just won't give up, will he? Tessa asked, reading over his shoulder. He's a narcissist, Mason said. He can't accept he lost. We need to be careful. He might try something desperate. Let him try, Mason said, a steely glint in his eye. We have the truth, and we have the people. He has nothing but money and bitterness. But Tessa was right to be worried. Damien was not done yet. He was calling in favors, spreading rumors to the press. Articles started appearing. The mailroom CEO is Sterling Vance doomed. Untested heir risks thousands of jobs. Mason read the headlines and felt a seed of doubt. Was he really qualified? Was he risking everyone's future? He looked at his grandfather's ledger for comfort. Wisdom, not avarice, he repeated to himself. He wasn't doing this for money. He was doing it for the legacy. He called a town hall meeting to address the rumors directly. Transparency is the only weapon against a campaign of lies. The town hall was packed. Every employee was present. Mason stood on the stage, no podium, just a microphone. He looked nervous, but he didn't try to hide it. You've read the news, he began. They say I'm just a mail boy. They're right. I am. And I'm proud of it. Because the mail boy knows your names. The mail boy knows your value. Damien knew your employee numbers. I know your families. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. I may not have an MBA, Mason continued. But I have this company in my blood, and I have you. We are going to build something they can't tear down with rumors. Are you with me? The applause started slowly, then built into a roar. It wasn't polite applause, it was a raucous, cheering endorsement. Tessa watched from the side, tears of pride in her eyes. He was a natural leader because he led with empathy. She saw Damien's old allies in the back, looking uncomfortable. They realized the tide had turned permanently. Mason finished his speech and walked into the crowd, shaking hands. He wasn't the distant god in the penthouse, he was one of them. True power comes from the consent of the led. After the speech, Tessa pulled him into a quiet corridor. "That was amazing," she said, her eyes shining. "I was terrified," he admitted, laughing nervously. "You didn't look it. You looked like a king." She stepped closer, the energy between them electric. "I think the mailroom boy deserves a reward," she whispered. She leaned in and kissed him, soft and sweet. It was the moment they had both been waiting for. Mason wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. The stress of the last few weeks melted away. They were just a man and a woman, finding solace in each other. "I've wanted to do that since the elevator," he murmured against her lips. "Took you long enough," she teased, smiling. Love is the quiet victory that makes the loud battles worth fighting. The lawsuit from Damien was dismissed a month later. The evidence of his embezzlement was too overwhelming. In fact, the district attorney was now opening a criminal case. Damien Sorel was facing prison time, not a settlement. Justice moves slowly, but it grinds exceedingly fine. Mason received the news while sitting in the company cafeteria. He shared a sandwich with the head of IT and the janitor. Tessa sat across from him, scrolling through the legal brief. "He's done," she said. "Assets frozen, passport seized. He's not going to hurt anyone ever again." Mason nodded, feeling a weight lift off his chest. "It's over," he said. Finally. But the company still had scars to heal. Trust had to be rebuilt, dollar by dollar, day by day. They launched the Vance Initiative, a profit-sharing program. Every employee got a stake in the company's success. Productivity skyrocketed, people worked harder for themselves. The press changed their tune, the Sterling Vance miracle. Mason was hailed as a visionary, though he deflected the praise. "It's the team," he would say in interviews. "It's always the team. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less." One day, Mason went down to the sub-basement archives alone. He found the spot where he had hidden from Greg. The shredder was gone, the room cleaned and organized. He placed his hand on the shelf where the ledger had been. "We did it, Grandpa," he whispered into the silence. "We saved it. And we made it better." He felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He turned to leave and saw Tessa standing in the doorway. She was holding a new file, labeled Future Projects. "Ready to go upstairs?" she asked. "Always," he said, taking her hand. They walked to the elevator, not the old freight one, but the main line. The doors opened, and they stepped in together. Going up. 6 months later, the company holiday party was legendary. It wasn't a stiff, formal affair like Damien used to host. It was a carnival, with games, music, and families invited. Mason wore a silly sweater, laughing as he lost a cornhole game. Tessa was running the raffle, her voice bright over the speakers. Everyone was happy, the fear was a distant memory. This was what a healthy culture looked like. Mason stepped out onto the balcony for a breath of fresh air. The snow was falling softly, blanketing the city in white. He looked at the skyline, thinking about how far he had come. From an invisible temp to the man who saved the company. It felt like a dream, but the cold air told him it was real. He heard the door open behind him. It was Tessa, holding 2 cups of hot cocoa. "Hiding from the conga line?" she asked, handing him a cup. "Terrified of it," he admitted. "I have no rhythm." "I'll teach you," she promised. "I'm a great teacher." "I know," he said. "You taught me how to trust again." They clinked cups, a toast to the year. "To the mailroom," Tessa said. "To the HR form you didn't file," Mason countered. They stood in silence, watching the snow fall. "I have a surprise for you," Mason said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box. It wasn't a ring, not yet. It was a pin. A gold pin in the shape of a key. "For the archives," he said. "And for unlocking my life." Tessa pinned it to her dress, tears in her eyes. "It's perfect," she said. "You're perfect," he replied. They kissed under the falling snow, a cinematic moment. Inside, the party raged on, a celebration of community. Outside, two people who had changed the world stood in love. The best stories are the ones we write together. The news of Damien's conviction hit the papers the next week. 10 years for fraud and embezzlement. Mason didn't gloat, he just felt a sense of closure. He visited the mailroom one last time as a worker. He sorted a few letters, feeling the familiar paper. It grounded him, reminded him of where he started. "Don't forget," he told himself. "Never forget." The new mail clerk watched him with wide eyes. "Is it true you used to work this route, Mr. Vance?" "Every day, kid," Mason said. "Best job I ever had. You learn everything down here. Keep your eyes open, and listen." He patted the kid on the shoulder and went back to the boardroom. Wisdom is meant to be passed down, not hoarded. The board meeting that afternoon was about expansion. They were opening a new branch in a struggling neighborhood. It would bring jobs and revitalization. It was Tessa's idea, and Mason backed it 100. "Profit with purpose," was the new motto. The board members, once skeptical, were now enthusiastic. Success is contagious, especially when it's shared. Mason looked around the table. The faces were diverse, younger, more energetic. He had replaced the old guard with fresh thinkers. The company was alive, breathing, evolving. He caught Tessa's eye across the table. She winked at him, a secret gesture. They were partners in crime, and partners in good. One rainy Tuesday, an old man visited the lobby. He claimed to be a friend of Elias Vance. Security called Mason, who came down immediately. It was Mr. Abernathy, his grandfather's old lawyer. "I have something for you," Abernathy said, handing him a letter. "Elias wanted you to have this 1 year after taking over." Mason took the letter, his hands shaking slightly. He opened it in his office, with Tessa by his side. "My dear Mason," it read. "If you are reading this, you survived the sharks. I knew you would. You have your mother's heart. The trust was a test, but the real test is what comes next. Don't let the power change you. Stay humble. Love, Grandpa." Mason wiped a tear from his eye. "He knew," Mason said. "He planned it all. He believed in you," Tessa said. "Just like I do." "He gave me the chance," Mason said. "But you took it," Tessa reminded him. "You did the work. Legacy is not what is left for you, but what is inside you." They framed the letter and hung it in the lobby. Not in the executive suite, but where everyone could see it. It became a symbol of the company's values. Employees would stop and read it on their way in. It reminded them that they worked for a human being. And that integrity was the highest asset. A company with a soul is an unstoppable force. Topic 15. 3 years later. Mason and Tessa were walking through the park. It was a sunny Saturday, and they were off the clock. "I've been thinking," Mason said, stopping by a fountain. "About the company?" Tessa asked. "No, about us." He got down on one knee, right there on the path. People stopped to watch, pointing and smiling. "Tessa Langford," Mason said, pulling out a ring. "Will you be my partner forever? Not just in business, but in everything?" Tessa laughed, crying at the same time. "Yes. Yes, you idiot, yes." He slid the ring on her finger, and the crowd cheered. It wasn't a corporate merger, it was a union of hearts. They hugged, oblivious to the applause. They had been through fire and come out gold. The mailroom temp and the HR coordinator. An unlikely pair who toppled a tyrant. And found love in the wreckage. True love is the ultimate promotion. They walked away, hand in hand. Ready for the next chapter. The company was safe. The bad guy was gone. And they had each other. Life was good. Really, really good. And it all started with a stolen hard drive. The story of Mason and Tessa became a legend at Sterling Vance. New hires were told the tale during orientation. Be like Mason, they were told. Be like Tessa. Stand up for what's right, even when you're shaking. The company grew to be a global leader in ethical business. Mason eventually retired, handing the reins to the next generation. But he never stopped visiting the mailroom. He and Tessa grew old together, happy and content. They raised a family, teaching them the same values. Kindness is strength, they taught their children. And never underestimate the person in the corner. Damien died in prison, forgotten and alone. His name was erased from the building, a cautionary tale. History remembers the builders, not the destroyers. One day, Mason stood in front of the building with his grandson. Did you really own all this, Grandpa? The boy asked. I took care of it, Mason corrected gently. We don't own things, Leo. We just look after them for a while. And we look after the people. That's the most important job. The boy nodded, looking up at the skyscraper. I want to work here someday, Leo said. Maybe you can start in the mailroom, Mason smiled. It's the best place to start. They walked away, the legacy secure. From the bottom to the top, and back to the earth. The circle was complete. And the votes were finally, truly, counted. Mason never wanted power, but he was the only one worthy of holding it. He proved that a title doesn't make a leader, integrity does. Damien had the office, the suit, and the arrogance, but he lacked the one thing that could save him: the loyalty of his people. In the end, the mailroom temp didn't just save the company, he saved its soul. Justice was served not by a gavel, but by a single vote that echoed through generations. If you enjoyed this story of undercover justice and corporate revenge, please subscribe to our channel. Join our community of story lovers who believe that the underdog should always win. Like this video if you've ever felt invisible at work. Comment I vote if you would have stood up for Mason. And share this with someone who needs a reminder that their time is coming. Don't forget to check out our playlist Undercover Billionaires for more hidden identity sagas. Hit that notification bell. Our next story reveals a janitor who secretly owns the bank.